The Canadian real estate market is facing a new wave of change. Remember a few years ago, the peak of 2022? You know, that frantic rush where buyers stretched their budgets to secure properties at record high prices amongst multiple offers, bidding wars, and record low emergency interest rates? Well, 3 years later, many of those buyers are now flooding back to the market as sellers as their priorities have shifted, and some are even desperate to sell, but not for the reason that you might think. These peak buyers are now about 3 years or so into living in their properties. If they were lucky, they locked into a 5-year fixed rate mortgage for around 2%, and they still have lots of time, or until sometime in 2027, before they have a renewal, and ideally, this market turmoil will subside by then. And then that is the time when hopefully they will be able to refinance for a modest interest rate increase and live happily ever after, or at least until prices return back to previous record highs. But unfortunately, many of them out there are not lucky. Many 2022 buyers bought real estate at record high prices. And in order to qualify for those high prices, they ended up taking a variable rate mortgage because they were easier to qualify for at that time because of Canada's mortgage stress test. But variable rate mortgages are also much riskier. And as a result, many of those peak buyers rode this wild wave of increasing payments or increasing amortizations of their original loans, meaning that they either had their payments skyrocket, or possibly now 3 years into their 25-year loan, they don't owe another 22 years remaining, but now the loan could be stretched out to over 30 or maybe even 40 years. But believe it or not, that is not the issue. Sure, some homeowners have had to let their properties go because of ballooning payments, while others have been proactive during this whole situation, and they sold their properties in advance of what would be a ballooning payment upon their mortgage renewal in the future. But the real issue, the real issue of why so many people are moving right now is, well, life just happens. After all, according to Stats Canada, in the previous 5 years leading up to 2022, almost 5.4 million households moved. That means every single year sees over 1 million households make a move because, well, it's time. And that time could be for many different reasons. Like over 100,000 people per year relocate because of a change in jobs. Almost the same amount move because they're lonely and want to move closer to family. Almost 700,000 households moved over that 5-year period because of a change in the family size, often meaning divorce. And the largest reason people moved, totaling 1.3 million families over 5 years, was that they wanted to buy a bigger or better home. And only 2.9% of Canadian households that moved in this time period did so in order to reduce their housing costs. So over any 5-year period, we can expect that 35% of Canadians will move because of life. However, now, because so many people looking to sell in 2025 bought at those previous record high prices, it's not so easy to move up or just move on. That's because their home is worth less than what they may have paid for it in 2021 or 2022. So what do you do if you bought at the peak and now your family has grown, you're getting a new job in a different town, or you want to relocate somewhere else because your priorities have shifted? Well, step one is booking a call with me using the link in the description below if you are moving within or out of Greater Vancouver. And step two is watching the rest of this video after you complete step three, subscribing to the channel. Because if you're a peak buyer, there's a good chance that you are stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, you bought your current property, say for, $1 million in March of 2022. And today, in order to move on, you would likely have to sell your place for $850,000 like your neighbors have been. Well, that means after fees in my market, you would likely walk away with almost your entire 20% down payment, or $200K, wiped out. Or if you're lucky, you may end up with, maybe $20,000 left over. But why would you ever do that if you could just look at the other option, which is to rent out your property until the property values rise back to peak levels? Well, using those same numbers, maybe you locked in somewhere around a 2% mortgage and your payment is now $2,956 per month. And that's not including utilities, property taxes, and insurance. So add those up and say now your monthly nut to crack is as much as $3,773. Well, now with immigration changes and a weakening economy, rents have also started to drop, and you would be lucky to now rent that property out for about $2,800 per month. This now is putting you in a negative cash flow position to the tune of about $1,000 per month, say for the next 2 years, if you were smart enough to lock in before. Now let's add some insult to injury. If you need to refinance in 2027, say at today's rate, somewhere around 4.5%, you'll be adding another $1,100 or so to your monthly payment. Meaning if you become a landlord, you might be tossing away another $12,000 to $25,000 per year just to hold on to an asset that is already a lost leader. That is a whole lot of money. And that is on top of your new living expenses of your next home, wherever that might be. If it's a rental, or if you can afford it, another purchase somewhere else. Now, here's some careful math you have to do for yourself if you're in this situation. First, ask yourself, can you afford to feed a rental that you don't live in $1,000 to $2,000 per month? For half of you out there in this situation, your answer is no. And for the other half, the answer is yes, but it still sucks. Second, you have to figure out if you are negatively cash flowing more or less than the principal versus interest in your monthly payment. Because there is an argument that as long as you're not putting all of your principal into each monthly mortgage payment, that technically the renter is still helping you pay down the equity of the home. So it's not a total loss. But if you're in a situation where you're not only paying the entire principal yourself, but you're also covering a portion of the interest, you are now just subsidizing your tenant. And you should probably sell right now. Should you decide to keep the property and actually wait for those peak prices to return? And yes, of course, they will return in time. You had better ask yourself how long you think that will take, because it will most likely not be months. It could be 3, 5, 7, maybe 10 to 15 years away. Honestly, we really don't know. But one thing we do know for sure is those prices won't return as soon as the next Bank of Canada interest rate cut. On top of that, let's say we do go back to $1 million. This is now just the break-even point. How much higher would you have to sell in order to recover all of the other money that you've put into the property as you took on all of those monthly losses? And that might be the biggest problem for you if you were a peak buyer and now it's time for you to move on. But more than anything, if your value is less than what you paid for the property, and if you rented it out right now, it would cash flow negative as well, you have to make a choice. Sell now, cut your losses and chalk it up to a very expensive learning experience, or continue to pay for a negative cash flowing asset for years in hopes of a break-even point in the future. And if it is time for you to cut your losses and sell, make sure to watch this video right now. This video will help you save whatever equity you have left in your property before it's gone too.